All right, and we're live. Chillcast MMA, and I'm here with Austin Brodie of MMAPanic. So, this past weekend was crazy. We had fights in South Korea. We had a handful of fights get announced over the past week in general. Some major implications, some not so much. We can get into that. We've got some cuts. We can dive into that. End of decade list, end of year list. They're still floating around. So, as always, MMA is busy. So, Austin, what's on your mind when it comes to the world of mixed martial arts?
Yeah, as of right now, I'm still. I know everyone's ready to kind of put a bow on the decade and wrap everything up, but I'm still blown away by that Korean Zombie performance. Everyone knows Frank Yeager's a legendary fighter, and he's former lightweight champion. And what we've all known about him is how durable he is and how hard he is to finish. And for Korean Zombie to come out and do that in the first round, just completely overwhelm and then knock him out, that was pretty impressive to me.
Yeah, that was probably the most impressive thing over the weekend. I would argue out of that. Well, I guess we might as well just get into it. The UFC went to South Korea this past weekend. UFC Busan, Busan. Hope I didn't butcher that too much. But we already glossed over it a little bit. We might as well get into it. The Korean Zombie defeated Frank Yeager in the first round, around the 3 minute mark. It was really dominating one-sided performance, so might as well try and get into it a little bit deeper. What are some of the main takeaways you had for Frank Yeager first? Because I guess before you go, one of my initial thoughts about it coming out is, man, Frank Yeager, that's a hell of a way to roll the dice, you know?
Yeah, my thing. First, we had to preface it by saying, Frank Yeager did take this fight on short notice, and he did take it on short notice on the other side of the world in South Korea, in the hometown of one of the most beloved MMA fighters we have right now. So, he was definitely up against a tough test for sure, and he always rises to the occasion. But yeah, man, it seems like as far as the 145ers go, the power in the hands of uh, Korean Zombie is pretty underrated. I mean, maybe not for people like me and you, but when he touches people, they get hurt. And he hit Edgar with that counter, and it rocked him. And Edgar wasn't able to really he tried to keep fighting, but he wasn't really able to find his center of balance after that, and he got overwhelmed by the Korean Zombie. I think it was going to be hard for any featherweight to beat Zombie in Korea. Like that seemed like that's just too much love, and just watching the event, and I went back and rewatched it. Just hearing how the crowd reacts to every punch he throws it's pretty incredible. They're oohing and awing every time he lands a punch. They never booed Edgar, but they always cheered Zombie. So yeah, that was a really cool night. It was a really cool performance. I'm interested to just hear from you what you would like to see from him next. I know people are calling for a title shot. Personally, I think they're going to give the title shot to Holloway, so I would like to see him go up against Zabit next, just to really get wild. But so, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think should be next for Korean Zombie?
Well, for Korean Zombie, I feel like he has a lot of opportunities ahead of him. It feels like he's weird a little bit. No, it feels like he's right on the cusp to where you wouldn't get frustrated if he did get at Alexander Volkanovski next. But at the same time, he's in that veteran state where you're like, one more stumble and then where does he go? I do feel like that does linger just because of the fact that Yair Rodriguez fight, that went down the way that it did, which I do feel like the more he's able to succeed in the octagon, we may look back at that as a fluke. What Yair does in the future is, subject to change as well. But I feel like he's playing both roles. Shogun Rua, when he was about to fight Anthony Smith, that's another sort of recent example to where, yes, he's a veteran, he's right on the cusp, he could technically get a title shot, but one more loss, where does he really go from there? So I feel like he's filling that role right now. But again, as far as this fight, and just to get into that, because I know you did touch on Frank Yeager, I've thought about this a lot. I'm just going to throw it back to you. What do you think if Frank Yeager retired right now?
Yeah, I think it would. I think it would be good. I think a lot of fighters. I'm not saying Frank Yeager's at the end of his the run for at all. I don't. I think he's past his prime. I do think that, but I think he has some meaningful fights left in him if that's what he wants to do. And I don't know if the drop down to 135 is still on the table. Like, I don't know if that'll help him or hurt him or anything like that. But I think he could retire right now with dignity and be remembered as like a legendary lighter weight fighter. I don't know what the criteria is for Hall of Fame career, but I imagine he's somewhere close to that. So, a lot of fighters fall into that trap of when they're getting to the end of their career where they just want to go out and get one. They want to go out on top. So if I win this fight, I'm going to retire. And then they'll win the fight and be like, man, I felt really good. I need to keep going. And then if they go in and lose their retirement fight, then it's like, I can't go out on the bottom. I gotta win my last fight. We've seen a lot of fighters get stuck in that. A fighter that comes to mind, Michael Bisping, who he got beat twice, finished twice in his last two fights, and he called it quits. I think that was mostly due to an eye injury, not the one that he lost, but his other eye was starting to be injured. But and he got a very dignified retirement. Months later, he was in the Hall of Fame. He's looked at as a legend, so that didn't affect him too much. So yeah, I think if Frankie Edgar's feeling like he can't compete at the top five, because we know he'll always be able to compete with featherweights or bantamweights or lightweights, whatever he chooses. But the elite of the elite, if he feels that he can no longer compete with them, then yeah, I think it'd be a pretty dignified retirement.
I'm just thinking from the perspective of if this is what we're going to see from Frankie, because for me, the glaring thing wasn't, I guess, the beat down, so to speak, or the fact that uppercuts seem to be something that, as of late, these taller strikers, it seems to work on Frankie now. But it wasn't even that. And, the fact that he prolonged his own TKO, which shows his great, none of that really even shocked me. It was the fact that when he went for a single leg attempt on Korean Zombie, it did nothing. That's the scary part because that's the part of his game. When we talk about, oh, he's scrappy and this and that, and we talk about his transitions. When we bring those things up, it's not without his wrestling. We're not just talking about his boxing and his counter striking. We're talking about his game as a whole and the fact that the Korean Zombie, someone who he can be taken down with effort. This is not something that's impossible to do. And to just see Frankie get denied like that right off the bat, and then you already know what immediately happened following. That's a terrible sign. And given your age, because he's a little bit longer in the tooth, if you drop weight classes, there's snipers at 135 too. So I don't think the road's going to necessarily get easier. So it's tough to say. And for the Korean Zombie, did you learn anything new, so to speak? Because it was a good notch, of course, but I didn't feel like I learned a new foil from it. I didn't feel like I saw anything that I didn't already see before.
Yeah, I agree. I was very impressed, like I said, but no, I didn't see anything new. We've seen Zombie do this to a couple opponents. One, Moicano, not Jeremy Stevens, Dennis Bermudez. Who was he? There was a Canadian fighter he did too back in the day. I forget his name, but regardless, yeah, he has that ability to get on, like, land something fast, and then he has a good finishing ability, so that he can get you out of there in the first round. So that I didn't learn anything new. I was just impressed by the caliber of opponent he was able to get to or to do it to. But like you've been touching on, that may be a result of a diminishing skill set of Edgar as much as it is the power of Korean Zombie. So that'll be interesting to see. I don't think Frankie Edgar is done. I haven't heard any interviews or anything, but I imagine he's going to keep going. I imagine he will try that jump down to 35.
That's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I don't doubt that. I mean, I'm sure he can make the weight. But another thing, before we get to the rest of this card and some other things that are going on, and as always, you can find me on Twitter at Nixon_Speaks, Austin at MMAPanic. But again, with this, another thing I wanted to get into before we move on. What do you think about Frank Yeager's 145 campaign as a whole? It sort of feels like I'm left wanting more. Like this move from 155, when he eventually lost the belt, um, it just felt natural, and it felt like okay, he could, the double champ talk that was circulating Frank Yeager when he moved down, and I just felt like we're waiting. Like okay, he wins a couple. we're like, okay, he gets rid of Chad Mendes. Oh, he's up next. Oh, he never, gets the McGregor fight, and then he's circulating, and McGregor moves on. Holloway comes. It just felt like things never lined up. You can't get past Aldo. So it's like there's a lot of little mini factors when you look back at Frank Edgar's campaign at 145 as a whole. So just what do you think about his run at 145 since it sort of felt like, I don't know if you can, for people listening, if you can go back to when Frank Edgar initially dropped down, it sort of seemed like it was a foregone conclusion. And once he couldn't get over the Aldo hump, things were just sort of back and forth from there till now. You're giving up a fight with Corey Sandhagen. You're going overhead, like you said and laid out, over to South Korea. You get TKO'd in under 3 minutes. I mean, what do you think about his run at 145?
Yeah, I think for any average fighter, his run would be a great run. He was ranked in the top five of that division for a very long time. He fought against some of the best. He beat a lot of the very best. But because of the things that you said, when he made that jump down, people were not only expecting him to be the champion at 45, they're like, he'll be the champion at 45, and then he could probably even drop down again and maybe be a 3-time champion. So there was a lot of hype and just confidence in Edgar dropping down in weight because, we were all impressed by the fact that he won the lightweight title at what he walked around at. So we were like, well, he could drop a couple of pounds. He could easily do that at featherweight. But like you said, there were some definite bumps in the road. Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor kind of jumped up the division, didn't let him get a shot for a while. When he did, it was Jose Aldo. So, and then he, three tries at the featherweight title, and you lose all of them. That's not that can't be what he was envisioning. It definitely feels unfinished, especially weirder things have happened. We've seen Aldo move down to 35 and look good. The weight cut. People are arguing whether he looked good or bad on that, but the performance was good, even though he lost the decision. A lot of people thought he won. If say Edgar did get revitalized by a move down to 35 and ended up being the 35 champion, the featherweight would still be weird, right, for his career because he accomplished it all at lightweight and then bantamweight, but he spent the majority of the limelight in the UFC at featherweight where he wasn't able to get the throne. So obviously that's a lot of what ifs, but yeah, just to answer your question, if his run at 45 was definitely underachieving for someone that came into that division being a former lightweight champion.
Yeah, and it's just unfortunate that, if his run at 145 does end and he does decide to drop down, it just sucks that this is the note we're sort of left off. But we'll see moving forward. So Volkan Ozdemir, this light heavyweight, Volkan Ozdemir defeated Alexander Rakic via decision. We can get into who did you think won. I know Rakic has come out and he's had some words. What do you think
Yeah,
about this fight?
I thought it was a close fight. I'd have to really go back and rewatch it to tell you like who I think actually should have won. Just going off of feel, I thought that I didn't feel that Rakic got robbed or anything like that. I thought it could have went either way. Uh, what did you think?
I had it 2 rounds to 1 for Ozdemir because, yeah, I think the only round, yeah, the first round is the only one I had Rakic winning because, and everyone wants to talk about the knot that Rakic got on his leg. If you really look at everything that happened outside of that initial blurry, what did Rakic do to where you feel as though he should get the win? I just feel like after the initial flurry, I immediately saw Volkan Ozdemir change his entire approach. He started finding his range, and even though Brekic, he had explosion, there was no continuity to it. Whereas I feel like Ozdemir, he was able to find his range. He was able to deny 8 out of 9 takedowns. And because of his confidence, when you get slung around by DC and submitted, to go in there against Wreckage, I just feel like you have confidence, and even his stats back that up. And I feel like because of that confidence boost he got from his wrestling, he was able to open up with his striking even more. digging himself out of that hole, and I didn't feel too many gripes about it when he won.
Yeah, I agree, and it was good for very good for him to get a win. I think it was 3 losses he had. He looked very relieved to get the win, and I think that might make people be like, "Oh, he didn't expect to win," but it's just if I think if he would have won by knockout, he would have looked that relieved. It just he was happy to finally get back in the winning column, and that's good. The light heavyweight division is really interesting. Lot of the it's really top heavy with the one guy, John Jones, and then the rest are kind of at the stage we're now. They're kind of like newer light heavyweights that are scrapping to try to figure out who's going to be the next guy to fight John Jones. And Ozdemir has been kind of a afterthought since, like you said, he got thrown around by DC and it didn't put up that good of a fight in his title shot. So he's been kind of an afterthought. But like we've seen in that division, a couple knockouts, couple good wins in a row, you're right back in there, and you could go up against John Jones.
Yeah, that's just one of those weird things where that's a giant silver lining. It's like for Rakic, I'm glad he got this loss out of the way early because what you were gonna not had you finished that flurry and gotten that 30-second knockout over Vulcan, you would have fought John Jones. Who knows what would have happened? Assuming he gets past Dominic Reyes, and then what? Like if you take that L and then what? You're in light heavyweight purgatory like everyone else. So I'm glad he actually did get this one. Like, and same thing with Johnny Walker. I'm actually glad he lost to Corey Anderson. Now it's sort of like halts the train a little bit. But it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with Vulcan. Like is there a clear next up for him, or do you feel like he also is in light heavyweight purgatory where he's just going to have to be willing to be the next
Yeah,
man up?
excuse me. I think he's in that light heavyweight purgatory because I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of. Usually when a top ranked guy gets a good win, we're like, oh, these are 1 or 3 people that he's probably going to match up with next, and I can't think of anyone. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there, so yeah, I think he's kind of in the purgatory. Like I said, he had a decent amount of losses in a row, so he's going to have to really prove something more than this to get back into like real light heavyweight talks. But yeah, I think he's kind of in that purgatory. He might have to take on some up and comers just to get a bit of a streak back.
All right. So the next one, I want to hear your thoughts on it, and I got a couple questions I want to ask. Charles Jourdain defeated Duho Choi, knockout, TKO, whichever one, in the second round. I got a lot of want to I have a lot of thoughts about Duho Choi as it pertains to this, but I don't want to just start off with that and make it seem like I'm taking away from Jourdain's moment because for him this is definitely the biggest win of his career, and he got it in South Korea on obviously enemy turf. So before I guess I sort of go into that, what
Yeah,
are your
man, it was
thoughts
a
on
fun
this
fight. It
one?
was one of the ones I was the most excited for, just because Choice has some time off, and maybe this is what you're going to touch on. I'm not sure, but if you look at his resume, he fights about once a year since he's joined the UFC, and now some of those fights have been, fight of the year contenders, but he's also coming off some losses. And I thought he opened up strong in the fight. At the beginning looked good. He's more than willing to have a firefight, and in front of that home crowd, they were loving it. But then, like you said, Jourdain, is it Jourdain? I'm not sure, but he came through pretty big, and it's got to be a tough thing to go over to Korea and beat one of their own in front of them, and then that's what he did, and he did it in impressive fashion, and in the fashion that unfortunately that's how we see Choi lose when he does lose. It's when he wins, it's very pretty and it gets a lot of hype, but his losses are usually by getting finished with strikes. So that's something to definitely think about in his career going forward.
It makes me so I just want to know what do you think about this? So I think one of the big problems with Duho Choi is it just watching that fight. The first thought I had once it was done was I question his sparring. I question what his sparring situation looks like. Like when he had that deer in the headlights moment, you saw it every time in the first round when it kind of was about that. he had that moment where like he would stand up straight, right, like he was anticipating the strike, and then it would land, which is clearly the opposite. Now you see Jourdain. Yes, he did. He didn't come out of this unscathed either, but like you saw more head movement on his side, especially in the second round, which ultimately led to the finish. But it's just one of those things where I'm looking at Duo Choi, and it just makes me question his entire training situation. Where I'm like, that only happens if you're fearful because you got knocked out before, and you've heard other high level fighters and commentary commentators and commentary about that and boxing as well. So what I'm saying is not new in that regard. But I'm thinking it's either that or it's your sparring, you're not getting touched up enough. So when you do catch a real sting in a fight, it sort of shocks you more, and then you become more fearful and weary of those heavier strikes because in your sparring you're probably the best guy in the gym, so where there's no one else that consistently push you and give you that constant pressure. So when you fight a Jourdain who's hungry AF, you know how to properly respond to that. It's just one of those things where when you stand up 3 times, when you initiated the contact in the pocket, and yet when the reaction happens, you're standing straight up. To me, that's just a bad sign. So, am I crazy or not?
No, I think it's definitely an interesting theory. We've seen what you're talking about play out 1,000 times. I'm sure it's going to happen 1,000 more times. And for Choi, I don't know a lot about his training camp. I don't know where he trains. And I definitely see what you're talking about. I think that could also be from the fact that, like you said, he's probably the best one in his gym. He probably felt fairly invincible. And then Cub Swanson kind of took that away in that awesome back and forth fight. And then Jeremy Stevens definitely took that away with his knockout. So maybe, a lot of that undecisiveness could come from those two losses he's had back to back too, where he's just like, he realized that he's not, the Korean Superboy. He's Doo-Ho Choi. So yeah, that's interesting. It'd be interesting to, I think that's one of those things we probably will never find out. Like usually when that happens, it gets rumored. Like, we heard about that with the Anthony Joshua when he got knocked out by Ruiz. We used to hear about it back in the day when Forrest fought Anderson Silva. And you hear about that at times. That's unfortunate. But, yeah, someone like him has a lot of talent. Maybe it would do him better to find a legitimate, like one of these super camps or something like that to go train in, where he's going rounds with top 10 fighters every single day. So he knows he knows exactly what the level of competition is before he steps into the octagon. So yeah, I think I think you're onto something, and it's something for him to think about in his career, especially now with 3 losses in a row.
Well, he's got 2 years off. He'll definitely be able to train and develop. I do think that 2 years off for Korean Zombie, we saw he was able to come back and on a win streak, and look, all he had to do was relax in the Yair fight, and the man would have won. So, barring that, he came back from his 2-year military service, mandatory military service, and he looked fine. So I do think if Doo-Ho Choi, he's got that coming up. I do think if he comes back from that, hopefully we see a new wrinkle in his game, because he's in a position where they're just going to give him either hungry up-and-comers or other named guys. And he's going, trying to get ranked coming back, or trying to be one of the marquee South Korean guys. Those are the guys he has to be ready for. And, having flashes where you look even the slightest bit hesitant in the pocket, especially when you initiated the contact, that's just a glaring flaw. And if me, just some random guys sitting here saying that, and what do you think the guys in American top team or wherever it may be, what do you think they're saying to their guys, trying to really prep for you over the course of 6 years? That's what I'm worried about. But, all right, moving on. Performance of the night, Korean Zombie. Another one, performance of the night, Alexander Pantoja. Fight of the night, obviously, Jourdain Choi. Jourdain made some weird comments about that. I'm sure everyone knows about living on his mom's basement, which just, again, brings us back to the almighty question, almighty dollar. Dana, keep going. But all right, We got some more fight announcements that got made over the past weekend, some recent, some a little bit old you guys may have heard about by now. We got some cuts that got made, some other little news and tidbits. So, what do you want to get to next?
It's whatever you want to, man. I don't care.
All right, so we might as well get into the fight announcement. So, we might as well start with the one that was most recently announced and just, I guess, work our way back. Kevin Lee, he's taking on Islam Makhachev, UFC 249. That's going to be I do believe the Khabib Tony card, and that's April 18th, 2020 at the Barclays, Brooklyn. So right off the bat, what do you think about that one? Feeling anything? Was this the fight to make for Kevin Lee coming off of this fight with Gillespie? What do you think about it from Islam's perspective? Feeling anything or past?
Yeah, I think it's a great fight, and both very very skilled guys, both similar skill sets. And after that big knockout win for Kevin Lee, he talked about how he wants a couple. He's going to get a couple more fights, a couple more great wins, and then go after the title. And he did talk about Islam after that fight. And that's the fight we're getting. And I didn't know that was on the same card as Khabib versus Tony. So that's a huge platform for both of them to fight on this within hours on the card of that weight's championship. And that's going to be a highly anticipated card because everyone wants to see what's going to happen with Khabib and Tony. And we could have a miniature match, not miniature, I guess, but a similar matchup that's just as enticing as far as like who has the edge on certain areas with Islam and Kevin Lee. Because man, I see that being a very very fun fight.
It's a fun fight, but it's one of those things that when I first saw that it was official, I immediately wondered from Kevin Lee's side who was the person that actually brought that up. That doesn't feel like knowing or at least going off of the public statements that Kevin Lee has made in the past. He seems like a person that is always wanting to punch up, and for him to go from ranking someone that was 9 or 10 in Gregor Gillespie and getting a win in impressive fashion, and then doing political cuts now for Bernie Sanders, and his name was circulated out of Trump's mouth and all of that, to now fight a guy who's ranked a couple slots back, officially at number 15 in Islam Makhachev. It just makes me wonder, like, was that a Faraz move? That seems like a very Faraz move. Like, no, we're gonna pump the brakes, and that fight seems like a fight we're gonna do right now, like to see where you're at before we hop right again back into the deep waters. That just feels like a developmental move from his part. Like he's looking at this as this is a fight where I can really see where I'm at. And from Islam, there's no question this was the fight to make for him right now, especially being on the same card as Khabib. So I like it for both of them, honestly. That was just one of those little weird things. It's not a good or bad thing. It's just a thing. So I just felt like I had to point that out. But next, we got Alex Oliveira. He's taking on Mickey Gall, UFC Norfolk, February 29th, 2020. That's on Elite Day. So, Cass, interested in thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty rough fight for Mickey Gall. It's got to be the best guy he's fought in the UFC so far. And Mickey Gall has had problems with lower tier fighters on at welterweight. So, he got beat by a very old Diego Sanchez. So, I don't know. I don't totally understand the matchmaking behind that. Alex Oliveira has fought some very great, highly ranked fighters. He's fought Cowboy, Mike Perry. He's fought some of the best, and now you're putting him in there with a fighter in Gall who is still young in his career, still green, and hasn't had the success in the lower tiers that usually propels you to get a even though Oliveira isn't ranked, he's a very tough welterweight, and I think Mickey is getting that here, and it just seems a little bit weird and forced. Like I don't totally understand why. I think Mickey Gall should have took a step back, not a step forward. So I think it's a good fight for Alex Oliveira, and who knows, Mickey Gall could easily prove me wrong, but it just seems like a very dangerous and weird matchup for Mickey Gall.
Look, I know that I've ran into Mickey Gone. I know he loves the Philly, the New Jersey area. So I'm sure at some point, if not now, probably in the distant future, this is going to get yanked up and someone is going to play this to you. So I'm going to say this directly to you, Mickey Gall. I think you're going to get hurt in this one because I think this is one step way too far, way too soon. I would have liked to see you fight someone else before this. I get it from a business perspective because if you win, I mean, it's off to the races. But where you're at right now,
Yeah, it's. I was shocked when I seen Alex Oliveira versus Mickey Gall because it just seems like I don't know. Seems like some Bellator matchmaking to me.
I'm, all right. Neil Magny, he's taking on Li Ji Lang, UFC 248, March 7th, 2020. Pass, interested, not interested, feeling anything from this.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm a big fan of Lee G. I can't pronounce his name that good, but I'm a fan of his. He's very good. He mostly fights on those fight nights in Asia. Is where did you say this one was at?
This is going to be at UFC 248. This, yeah, UFC 248. And I might as well announce it now. Well, it's already out. So Robert Whitaker, he's taking on Jared Cannonier, UFC 248 as well. So this is the two of them are on that card. So
Well, that one's awesome. But yeah, it it'll be interesting to see where Neil Magny's at in his career. Obviously, he had a lot of ups. Like that one year, I think he won like 5 or 6 fights in the year, and then he's had some downs. He's got outclassed by uh, the elite fighters in the welterweight division, and even some of the ones that aren't as elite. So it'll be an interesting fight for him. It'll be cool for G Lang. It'll be cool for him to finally get some exposure in America. This is, to my knowledge, it's one of his first cards in America since he's been on the run that he's been on. So that'll be a fun fight.
Neil, I don't want to Neil, Neil, Neil Magny. Like I don't want to go through another year where he wins one, he loses one. I can't with him. I don't want to say he's the guy that I can't tell if he's gonna win or lose, but I just can't tell. This fight seems tailor made for him to get knocked out in the first round, but at the same time, he's tricky enough to where he could make this interesting to where he could pull out a decision. But this is just I don't want to go through another year with Neil Magny. I feel like I'm probably never going to get another chance to say it, so I'm just going to say it now with Neil Magny. Like I don't want you like I feel like this past year was with Derek Brunson, or more so in the beginning. But I don't want to see you have another mediocre year where you're just in the middle of the pack and you're just playing filler on the bottom half of pay per views and the upper half of ESPN Plus cards. No more Magny. Let's go on a real run. And for Li Ji Lang, you want to talk about making a splash. I know that prior to Weili Zhang doing her thing and capturing the title, Li Ji Lang was actually the one that they were talking about being a big star for the Chinese market as far as the UFC is concerned. So if he's going to have any sort of, and he's been on a run ever since he's been in the UFC as well. So if he can get it done over Neil Magny, then I think the sky's the limit for him, and we got another superstar.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And from Neil Magny, I think if he does win, he has to start winning impressively because I think that's a lot of his problem too. Is like you said, he's very inconsistent, and that's fine when you're someone like Mike Perry or something like that that's just going to go out and have a wild fight or get a knockout. But usually when Magny wins, it's not as it's impressive if you're someone that knows the sport, knows about like how difficult it is to put someone in bad situations and out cardio somebody. But for the mainstream fan, they're not seeing him finish anybody or get a dope submission or anything like that. So I think he needs to win and start winning more impressively. Obviously, that's a lot easier said than done, but I think that's a big problem in his career also.
All right, you said Bellator. I think Neil Magny and Bellator sounds sweet to me. But that's for a completely different
Mm-hmm.
discussion. Obviously, he's still in the UFC, but so I'm not trying to say I've heard. I'm not trying to say I've heard anything, but Magny, Bellator, I like the sound of that moving forward. But Robert Whitaker, he's taking on Jared Cannonier. I actually don't have a lot of thoughts on this because it feels necessary for both guys. It just feels like for Cannonier, he needs to get a splash because a little bit of what you said about Neil Magny, I guess you could say about Jared Cannonier, and that he has to start really putting guys away. Even though, in my opinion, I don't know someone who's gotten a more high profile win, that being his win over Anderson Silva, but yet got so little buzz off. So I think if he shows out against Robert Whitaker, who's a relevant name and people respect, and for Robert Whitaker, is what we saw against Israel Adesanya, is that going to be a pattern? Is that the new trend with you, or was that just ring rust that Israel Adesanya had to knock off? So I guess we'll find out one way or the other with him as well. So any thoughts on that besides just that?
Yeah, I think it's a like you said, it's a good matchup for both of them. For Robert Whitaker, it's a way to come back from that knockout loss, get a rebound, and do it against one of the top guys in the division. For Cannonier, it's kind of like a mock title shot almost. You get to fight someone who just was a champion and is definitely championship worthy. You get to do it on a card where you're not the main attention. You're not going to have to do all the as much as the press and all the carrying of the promotion stuff. And it's a 3-round fight, so it's kind of like a mock title shot for Cannonier. And if he can get past this, whether it's by decision or whatever, you got to say he's next in line. And Whitaker could get right back a lot of that hype he lost against Israel if he can get an impressive win, whether it's a knockout or something like that. But I think the most interesting part is what Robert Whitaker we're going to see. We're going to see if he's more gun shy, see if he's less aggressive, more smart and technical, or if he's just like, you know what, that was just something I just got caught, and then just comes out and tries to blitz over Cannonier. So I think that's going to be a very fun fight. It's going to be a very high skill level for a fight in the middleweight division. So I think that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, yeah. That just feels like one of those ones where that'll play out how it's going to play out. I don't feel like there'll be any extra drama or anything heading into it. This will be one of those fights where once the card actually gets closer, we'll look at it and be like, oh, wow, this is actually on it. So this has that sort of vibe to it. But moving forward, another thing that I sort of wanted to touch on a little bit outside of that was the UFC. They cut Zach Otto, the UFC cut Zach Otto, Kurt Harbaugh, among 8 other fighters last week. And it seems like every couple months the UFC does this move, or at least once or twice a year, where they cut a small portion of the roster. So again, I guess heading into the new year with ESPN, it feels like moves like this should be magnified a little bit more. But am I overreacting to this? Is this not a big deal? It's just business as usual because these guys have been sub 500 or 500 and below. Um, should we make it a big deal? Because again, it calls into question what does it mean to have a multi-fight deal with the UFC if they could cut me if I lose one or two and I still have 3 left? What does that ultimately mean? How are you feeling about this, or is this just business as usual?
Yeah, I think it's just business. Like, it seems like a pretty normal happening for them. But I get weird. Like, to me, it's weird you do it a week before Christmas. Like, I don't know. Like, if that was just there was a reason they had to do it that or a business decision, but that just seems kind of shitty for no reason. A lot of those fighters on the list, I completely understand why they were released. They haven't had the best run as of late, but there's some fighters that I don't understand. I don't understand releasing Liz Carmouche. She's the first woman to ever fight in the UFC. Her record is good. She just fought for the title against Valentina and had a very boring fight in which she lost, which is why I think she got cut. I think it's punishment for putting on that boring performance, which is crazy because like who could go in there against Valentina and look good other than Amanda Nunes. So yeah, the Liz Carmouche one was awful. It was bad. It was the worst because she was doing a promotion. She was at the UFC card doing a promotional event for them, like literally out hyping up their card and going to talk to the troops. And she's a former troop herself, and doing all this promotional stuff for the UFC. And while she's in the van doing that, she gets told she's been released. Like that's awful. Like, you're a business. You should be way more professional than that. You should know who you have out doing promotional work for you. You shouldn't fire someone mid promotional work. But Bellator was quick on the trigger, picked her up right away, had her out at Hawaii for their event, and she got a lot of positive hype from that. So I think it's on to greener pastures for her. But I don't know. They got to get better at how they're like. How does that? How do you make that mistake? That's the weird one.
Yeah, and I guess she got released towards the end of the previous week. That's why I didn't mention it. But she's another interesting case because what I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Like, it's been on my mind a lot this year, and things like the BMF title coming out, and guys getting title shots off of win losses, and just a lot of weird business. But then guys have to wait out a year to get a rematch when they just all of these things have sort of come to a climax over the past year. And then with this move, it just feels like, so what's up with the credentials? Because the UFC, or at least Dana, has clearly said that he's trying to bolster that roster. Or anytime someone presses him on it at a media event, that's usually the tune he sings, that he realizes that he's trying to bolster it. And you need people with credentials there. So even if you don't believe in her anymore as a promoter, the young up and comers can at least feed off of that. Just cut her and let her walk like that. It just the meritocracy thing is like, once again, it gets called into question. What is the UFC actually looking for from its athletes? And like Chael says, and he's probably the most famous person that has said it, but you can't tell me the fans, all the fans want exciting fights, because GSP never fought exciting fights. So it's like, it's just interesting, and it just calls that into question again. But like you said, Bellator was quick on the draw on that one, and it's just going to be interesting to see. I guess the reason why I brought it up was because moving forward, I just wonder, with them having to field, so many cards on ESPN, what are they going to start to look for moving forward if you have to put subscription rates? I just wonder, is the relationship with them that tedious? Is the relationship with ESPN that tedious, so that ESPN is really going to be hamstrung about the amount of metrics, or is the UFC going to feel any sort of pressure because of the analytics with ESPN bringing other content over, and with other broadcasting rights being on the market? Does that affect how the UFC looks at its fighters? And I just wonder, when I hear 8 fighters get released all in one fell swoop, and like you said, Liz Carmouche the week before, it just sort of makes me bring that into the question once again. But are there any more thoughts about it, or is that pretty much it? Or, because like you said, it's like it's business as usual. And one thing I will say for the other promotions, like, if this is how it's going to be, and it is, just going to be the norm because of some of the things I've outlined, you've outlined, if this is going to be the norms, then the other promoters better get ready to feast that.
Yeah, and it's just it's a little bit mind boggling to me, to be honest. Like, the fact that you can get cut for having a good record but being perceived as being a boring fighter, but you don't get cut for repeated failed drug tests or outside of the cage issues that are pretty awful, or any of that stuff doesn't disqualify you. But being deemed as a boring fighter to Dana White or the matchmakers can cost you a contract. Like, back in the day, Yushin Okami got released coming off of a win, and it was because Dana said, "Well, I just don't think he's ever going to be champion again." It's like, well, what is that? I mean, this is a sport. He has to prove that. Like, we don't predict it. It's like me sitting here right now. I don't think Conor McGregor is ever going to be champion again, but obviously that's a different situation. So I don't know. we have to constantly remind ourselves that it's more entertainment than sport, which sucks for people that like the sport aspect of it more. But that's what it is, because if it was actually just the sport, the only thing that would matter would be wins and losses. And as we get proven week in and week out, that's just not the case with the UFC or with MMA as a whole.
Yeah, and I guess it's just one of those another one, and we've had a lot of them this year. Just another unfortunate tell, and just a sign that really, what does it really mean to have a long term contract with the UFC? Hear these guys, oh, I just signed a 6, 8 fight deal worth X amount of dollars. It's like, nah, man. You get on a 2, 3 fight losing skid, you're out the door. And it can be like that. It's unfortunate, but again, with Bellator, Ryzen, PFL for at least now, there are some other homes out there. So the free agency market, if the UFC is just going to keep this up moving forward, then I feel like we're just going to keep seeing a trickle of other free agent stories. That's just the nature of the beast moving forward, and I feel like free agent signings, if they're willing to cut more high profile guys or let more high profile guys walk, then we may completely be out of the era where the UFC does the opposite, where they sit guys on the shelves and do all this. We may just be at the new norm. And if that's the case, then at least the other promoters can eat off of some more scraps as opposed to just doing whatever it is. I'm trying to just find a silver lining out of it, but it's just one of those things that to me is one of the most damning things about the sport. It's just that you can have a long term contract, you can lose two in a row, and they can just cut you, and there's just nothing, nada you can do about it. That's to me when other people or new friends or whatever, when they get past the I'm watching one or two cards phase, and they start actually typing and looking stuff up, and they find out that detail, that's the number one detail that, at least for me, has turned other people off when they find that out. Or to me, that's just the one thing where I'm like, no, there ain't no spin on that.
Yeah, I agree. And as far as those contracts go, I think if you have a 5 fight contract, they should have to pay you for 5 fights. The only exception should be not if you lose or if you had a boring fight. It should be like there should obviously be a moral clause to where, like, if you get into some sort of trouble, sexual assault, anything like that, then they can obviously then that they don't want you representing their company, so they can do that. But yeah, it's not fair, because a fighter can't have 3 fights and be like, I don't like how the UFC's promoting me. They're not putting enough hype behind this. I'm going to go have my next fight at Bellator. They can't do that. But the UFC can just decide. And that's in the contract that they can terminate you at any time, I think. But, man, you're right. It's not fair. It's one of the most hard and dangerous sports, and it's one where the athletes get taken care of the least.
Yeah, and I get it. I guess, from the UFC's perspective or from Dana's perspective, you want hungry fighters. And that's just another layer to get that effect or draw that effect out. But man, is this whole business, we already know that. We don't have to walk all the way back down this trail, but it's again just another example that MMA is a whole business. Or as I like to say, MMA be ice cold. All
Mm-hmm.
right, so
Yep.
before we get out of here,
I agree.
oh no, was there anything else you had on that? All right, so
Nope,
before we
that's
get
it.
out of here, any other stories you feel like you missed? Any under the radar? Anything going on in the world of mixed martial arts that you feel like you glossed over? Anything at all?
Right before we hopped on, I had just seen that Sugar Sean O'Malley is returning to fight Jose Quineros in February, so that'll be exciting for his fans. He had a lot of hype behind him, and he's talking about people being boring. He's anything but that. He's a very exciting fighter. He who lost a lot of that hype fight wise by the tainted or failed drug test, and he was able to stay relevant. I think with the video game playing and the content he puts out. So I think that's going to be a big deal for a lot of his fans.
That's going to be an interesting one. And when did you say that was going down?
I'm pretty sure February 7th. Might not be the 7th, but definitely February.
Oh, well, that's right around the corner. I don't have any initial thoughts. Do you?
No, I just think it'll be the guy he's fighting is very tough and scrappy, so I think it'll be a pretty cool fight. You know, O'Malley always has some cool fights, always has some drama in the fights, so I think it'll be similar.
All right, and for me, I've got nothing this week. It's going to be exciting because for, I guess, the next time the UFC sets up shop, it's going to be, the McGregor show is going to be back in town. So I guess all eyes are on that. But nonetheless, from this past weekend, I'm still sort of psyched about the Korean Zombie. He's one of the last guys from the olden age when I first started watching that are still relevant and around. So I'm excited anytime he performs. Frankie Edgar, I guess my last word on that is, if he is going to actually stick around, because I guess I was a little doom and gloom on him, but if he is going to stick around and move forward, I actually think that he should stick around at 145 and not move down, because given his age, yes, I know he can make the weight, but I just don't like the idea of him cutting 10 more pounds and then going in there with guys that can strike pretty much just as good. So that, I guess, is my final thought on that. But before we get out of here, Austin, let the people know where they can find you, social media, websites, anything you got like that.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at MMAPanic, and the website is MMAPanic.com.
All right, you heard it there. Austin on Twitter at MMAPanic. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Nixon_speak. Once again, at MMAPanic, at Nixon_speak. And I'll see you guys later on in the week.